Now, as you can see, they're dressed like their characters. They took this thing serious. Miss Ava Jimson, give it up for Miss Ava. Miss Ava is Jane Bolin. What did Miss Jane Bolin do?
First African-American female judge in the United States and the first black woman to receive a law degree from Yale.
Yeah, all right.
But did you see this hat? Yes. Next we have Natalie Satterwhite. Oh, Miss Natalie, tell them who you are.
I am Michelle Obama. I am a lawyer and I served as the First Lady of the United States. I am the first African American woman to do so.
Yes, Michelle Obama. Now this all, you giving her love. She did a good job, didn't she?
Hey.
Let me introduce you to Miss Aubrey Satterwhite. Audrey, oh, I wrote it down wrong. Lord mercy, bless my heart. I didn't mean to. She is Ruby Bridges. Doesn't she look cute? All right, you ready to tell them? Say, first African
American
to go
to go.
to an all-white school.
I go to an all-white school.
All right.
I don't know if you're going to receive anything else today, but you're going to remember that. All right. Cortland Hood. Oh, Miss Condoleezza Rice.
I was the first African American woman to be Secretary of State.
Yay! All these women in power. All right, Grayson. Come on, Grayson Johnson. Y'all give it up for Grayson.
All right.
He looks sharp, don't he? Grayson, who are you?
Dr. Charles Drew.
And what did he do?
I am responsible for America's first major blood bank.
Yeah!
Oh, yeah.
All right. And to close it out, we have Kamaya Jones, and she's Miss Rosa Parks. Stand right here, Miss Kamaya. Y'all give it up for Kamaya.
I rode the buses and obeyed the laws that kept me apart from white people, but I did not think they were right. One day, I was riding the bus. I was sitting in one of the seats in the black section for black people. The bus started to get crowded. The front seats filled up with white people. The front filled up with white people. One white man was standing up. The bus driver looked back at us, black people sitting down. I refused to move because a white person wanted my seat. I was already in the colored section, so I didn't get up. I was not breaking the law, but they still took me to jail.
So can we stand up and give these babies a standing ovation for what they did today? Y'all did a wonderful job. Y'all spoke with boldness.
All right.
And we celebrate you this morning for our Black History program. Y'all go ahead, take your seat.
Amen.
Parents, when church is over, they're to come downstairs and see me in the fellowship hall, okay? Okay. Next, we will have the continuation of our Black History program with our teens.
Good morning.
Morning.
I wanted to touch on the real meaning and why we have and started the month of Black History. Black History Month is an opportunity to understand Black histories going beyond stories of racism and slavery to spotlight Black achievement. Black History Month is an annual celebration of achievements by African Americans and a time for recognizing their central role in the U.S. history. Also known as African American History Month, the event grew out of Negro History Week, The story of Black History Month begins in 1915, half a century after the 13th Amendment abolished slavery in the United States. How did Black History Month begin? In 1915, in response to the lack of information on the accomplishments of Black people available to the public, historian Carter G. Woodson co-founded the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History. In 1926, the group declared the second week of February as Negro History Week to recognize the contributions of African Americans to U.S. history. Few people study Black history, and it wasn't included in textbooks prior to the creation of Negro History Week. This week was chosen because it includes the birthdays of both Frederick Douglass and abolitionist and former U.S. President Abraham Lincoln. President Lincoln led U.S. during the Civil War, which was primarily fought over the enslavement of Black people in the county. Many schools and leaders began recognizing the week after its creation. The week-long event officially became Black History Month in 1976 when U.S. President General Ford extended the recognition to honor the too often neglected accomplishments of Black Americans in every area throughout our history. Black History Month has been celebrated in the United States every February since. Who was the founder of Black History Month? Carter Goodwin Woodson, known as the father of Black history. Woodson dedicated his career to the field of African American history and lobbied extensively to establish Black History Month as a nationwide institution. He also wrote many historical works, including the 1933 book, The Miseducation of the Negro. Carter was an American history author, journalist, and the founder of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. He was one of the first scholars to study the history of the African diaspora, also known as Jewish people who lived outside of Israel, including African American history. A founder of the Journal of Negro History Week in 1916, Woodson has been called the father of Black history. In February 1926, he launched the celebration of Negro History Week of Black History Month. Woodson was born in Virginia, the son of former slaves. Woodson had to put off schooling while he worked in the coal mines of West Virginia. He graduated from Berea College and became a teacher and school administrator. He gained graduate degrees at the University of Chicago, and in 1912, he was the second African American to obtain a PhD degree from Harvard University. Why do we celebrate Black History Month? Initially, Black History Month was a way of teaching students and young people about Black and African Americans' contributions. Such stories have been largely forgotten and were neglected part of the national narrative. Now it's seen as a celebration of those who impacted not just the country, but the world with their activism and achievements. In the U.S., the month-long spotlight during February is an opportunity for people to engage with Black histories, go beyond discussions in racism and slavery, and highlight Black leaders and accomplishments. Black History Month was created to focus on attention on the contributions of African Americans in the U.S. It honors all Black people from all periods of U.S. history, from the enslaved people first brought over from Africa in the early 17th century to African Americans living in the United States today. Some of the African American heroes, are Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. was an activist and pastor who promoted and organized nonviolent protests. He played a pivotal role in advancing civil rights in America and has won a Nobel Peace Prize for his efforts to fight racial nonviolent inequality in a nonviolent manner. Barbara Rose Johns. On April 23, 1951, 16-year-old Barbara Johns led her classmates in a strike to protest the standard conditions at Robert Wilson Mountain High School, which is now a museum, in Prince Edward County, Virginia. The protest led to a court case that became one of the 5 cases that the U.S. Supreme Court reviewed in Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka when it declared school segregation unconstitutional. Claudia Colvin. On March 2, 1955, she was arrested at the age of 15 in Montgomery, Alabama, for refusing to give up her seat to a white woman on a crowded segregated bus. This occurred 9 months before the more widely known incident in which Rosa Parks, secretary of the local chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, helped spark the 1955 Montgomery bus boycott. Today, Black History Month continues the discussion of Black people and their contributions throughout activities such as museum exhibits, and film screenings, and by encouraging the study of achievements by African Americans year-round.
All right, amen.
Good morning, church.
Morning.
At Black History, I really thought of just who to talk about or what to talk about. But then in class, in school, we was learning about the Revolutionary War. There was a picture just like that on the screen, that Black people were actually fighting in the Revolutionary War. That a lot of us probably didn't even know that. A lot of us probably just thought that the first time Black people were fighting in a war was in the Civil War. But this is 1775, and there were thousands. There was 2,000 Black Americans that were fighting in the Revolutionary War for us. And there was 200,000 fighting for the British at the time. During the Revolutionary War, thousands of Black Americans jumped into the war on both sides. But unlike their white counterparts, they weren't just fighting for independence or to maintain British control. In a time where the vast amount of Black African Americans lived in bondage, their focused labor filling the economy of the fleeting nation, most took up arms hoping to be free from the shackles of slavery. In fact, when enslaved people had choices in the matter, they signed on which side, whatever side they thought would give them freedom faster. So that was on both sides. They did not care. They just wanted their freedom. If that mean they had to fight for the British, they would. If that mean they thought the United States would give them their freedom first, they chatted with the Americans. According to estimates, like I said, 500 to 8,000 African descended people participated in the revolution, and upwards to 2,000 served the British. Many fought with bravery and skill. Their collective memory below are the stories of several African American figures. They were doing everything they possibly could to get their slavery back then. Even though slavery just began, it was still worse, but it wasn't as bad as it got. That's why I want to talk about today, how slavery somehow got worser and worser. And that even back then they was fighting a losing battle, because back then a lot of them wasn't educated. So even when they did get out of slavery, only thing they knew was the plantations. So what else could they really do? They had no money, they had no education, they couldn't write, they couldn't read, so they couldn't do nothing else but go right back to the slavery that they was in, just to go back to a plantation and do it all over again. Now, one of these people that was the person that was leading them, George Washington, as you may know, also very much had slaves. But I want to talk about being into the system, how at the age of 11, George Washington was inherited slaves at the age of 11, even though he didn't want them. By law, he couldn't get rid of them. If he got rid of them, he would have went to jail. So by law, he had to keep the slaves that he was inherited. He was also inherited 400 acres and 28 acres of a family farm that the slaves worked in. His wife also inherited slaves. In fact, out of the 280 slaves that lived in Mount Vermont that George Washington was living at, 272 of them were owned by him and his wife. Even as a child, Washington could see the separation of how white people treated the black people. He could see that they were treating them unfairly and with unjust. His wife was different though. His wife was very much pro-slavery, and she would, at any chance that she can get by and get and inherit more slaves. There were, in fact, 4 slaves that ran away. And unlike his wife, Washington did absolutely nothing to stop them. In fact, he stopped his wife from getting the slaves back. Even at Yorktown, Washington had a slave that he made a spy. He trusted one of the black slaves they had so much that he made them a spy so they can get information on the British. He was upset when he was sent back to slavery for all the braveness that his slave had done in the war to win them the war. So he gave them an appeal and bought his freedom. George's opinion on slavery had changed throughout the years. When he got older, he softened up and realized what the slavery was and how it was wrong. While, like I said, his wife got worse and worse. Even though his wife had a half sister which was mixed with black and white. Washington once visited an Englishman that slavery was neither a crime, nothing that the U.S. ever did, not assuming liberty to. The quote was to Washington that he said, "Until the minds of the slaves have been educated to understand what freedom is, the gift of freedom would only assume it abused." He was saying that he wanted all the slaves that he had to be educated, so when they did get free, they would know what to do with the freedom that they had.
Yeah, yes, sir.
He wanted to make sure that all his slaves could read, write. He even taught them how to do trade, like carpenting, all that stuff. He wanted to make sure that when he died, in his will, he said when he died that he wanted all his slaves to be free. So when that did happen, he wanted to make sure that all of them knew exactly how to read, write. He wanted to make sure they were educated, because like I said, if they were not educated, they would just wind right back on the plantation.